Today we're going to talk about the Stihl FG2, which is a bench mounted file guide. I'm going to go in depth about it, show you guys how they work, how to set one up, how to use it sort of thing. What I'll do is I'm going to break down every part of this and then we'll put a chain on it and we'll go through it and show how to fix it. The advantage that these have is I generally round file when I'm cutting. So I will sharpen a saw when I'm out using it. I need to create a shape in that cutter that I can easily replicate with just a round file. These sort of systems give me that option. I'm going to upset a lot of people when I say this, but it's much more precise with something like this than it is with a chain grinder. With a chain grinder, you generally have to bring them down and give them the little bumps on the wheel as you come down. It's very hard to get the wheel to stop in a precise location every time. To create a properly sharpened chain that's easy to maintain with a round file, you need to be using the rounded part of the wheel to create the cutter shape that's required. It is actually very difficult to do that. You need to pay a lot of attention and it slows down the process. When you use something like this, we're just using that round file, but we're holding it in a much more precise way. Because we've got the ability to control most of the little movements that you generally make, everyone, no matter how good they are with a round file, is going to be slightly off. These hold it much more closely aligned. Because of that, we can get a little bit more precision out of it. We can take a chain that cuts okay out of the box. We can take a round file and make it cut well. To steal the phrase from Game of Logging, which is a YouTube channel that you guys should definitely be watching. He has an extensive amount of knowledge and experience when it comes to all things chainsaw related. To steal his phrase, I don't want a chain that cuts well. I don't want a chain that cuts okay. I want a chain that cuts nice. And not just nice, really nice. And to get that little bit extra out of them, it takes a bit of time and precision. So I still utilize one of these. I will sharpen generally 4 or 5 times, just using a round file, no guides or anything like that. And then I'll come back and I'll put the chain on this. It allows me to go back and just fine tune that result that I'm looking for. Today we're going to use it just to sharpen a new chain that's been used once. We're just going to go through and change that factory shape into basically the recommended settings. I just want to show you guys how to use one of these things and then you can progress from there. If you do have one of these or a Granberg or any of the bar mounted guides, they allow a level of precision to try different things that you generally won't be able to do without one. You can very precisely control things like side plate angles if you want to experiment with different angles. You can see the effect of that. You can sharpen a chain with a 60-degree side plate angle. You can come back and do it with 70 or 75. See what you get, gain or lose. So these allow a lot of experimentation. It gives you a very precise way of doing it. They're not perfect. Bits of this move. We'll go through it all. But anyway, let's explain all the parts of it, how they work, and then I'll show you how to use one. Okay, so the first thing you'll probably notice with mine is this is a bench mounted piece of equipment and I do not have it mounted on a bench. I made this crappy little stand out of some scrap metal that was laying around, put a flat plate on the bottom, drilled and tapped 2 holes in it. This way it allows me to just clamp it into a vise, have this mounted up high. So this is up right at my chest level. This means I can keep a very close eye on what I'm doing. I highly suggest this. It makes setting them up much easier. So there's multiple parts of this. We've got a big wing nut on the bottom here, which allows us to pull this top plate off. So that's our lower plate that gets mounted to a bench. This whole upper section locates on these 2 round lugs at the top. You just drop it down onto them and do up that wing nut. The reason this separates from the bottom plate is we need to be able to flip this around when we do the other side of the chain. So we'll cover that later as well, but you just undo the wing nut, pull that off and flip it around. It then bolts back up. You then just bolt it back up like that and allows us to work on the other side of the chain. While we've got it flipped round on the back here, you can see there is a nut that's just located there. That is part of the chain holding system. The other part is this cam lever in the front here. If you're doing something small like 0.43 gauge chain, you generally need to do that nut up about 1/8 of a turn. We need to do that so when we move the clamp over to lock it in position, it just closes that gap. It pinches the cutters down in there. So this is our little cam locking system in the top there. Obviously your chain link goes in there, we lock that. You want to hold the cutters as tight as you can You just need to adjust that nut to make that happen. So as we move up, we have this section here that holds our file. If you are running shorter files, you may need to undo the screw at either end of this. When you do that, you can close the two ends up. So if you're using short files, that's helpful to know. Our file mounts into that lower bar there. On the top, we have a little knob down here and some measurements. They only list 30 and 35 degrees up on the top. However, each movement in the little notch, so that's it at 0, each movement at a notch is 5 degrees. So you can work it out from there. The other adjustments we get on the back here, we have another little knob. I believe this changed to a locking nut later on, but this allows the whole thing to tilt. So again, it moves in 5-degree increments. So they have marked 0 and 10. You can move it so it's 5 and 10. My one has been modified to allow me to square file with the Valorb 3 squares, so I get a lot more movement. Moving back, our next adjustment here, this controls our height. As we wind it in, it raises this whole assembly up and we can lower the file down. I'll go through how to use all of that. At the back here, we have our adjustment for our chain stop. You can wind it in and out to move our cutters along. Again, we'll go into detail on this later. I can't recall if they actually come with this, but I highly suggest getting something like a wing nut, stick it on the back. They do move in use, so it just gives you an option to lock it in place. So what I'll do is I'll set a chain up on it and we'll just go through making this work like a factory one. It will give you a basic guide on how to use one of these things if you want and give you some ideas on what you can do different. So we'll go through the basics of how to set one of these up and how to use it. So obviously the first thing we need to do is put in our file. So we've just undone those screws a little at the bottom, put it in there, do them up with your fingers to begin with. These do require a tool. Just use your general chainsaw tool. I've always got one laying around. You don't have to do them up super tight, just give them like a little 1/8 of a turn or something like that just to nip them up. The next thing we're going to do is check our chain and we're just going to set it up like a factory one. So I'm going to follow Oregon's recommendations because it is an Oregon chain that I'm about to use. So they want 25 degrees. The easiest way for me to do this, at its maximum adjustment range here, that's 35. So 35, back one notch 30, back another 25. Again, Oregon's calling for 10 degrees of down angle, which is your file handle being down. So we undo our knob at the top here and we give ourselves 10. You can just start from 0 and go 1, 2, and that'll give us 10. So we've got our angles at the top here, we've got our 25 and 10. Quick side note, we're actually going to end up with slightly less than 25 degrees of angle across the top of that top plate. It's to do with using the down angle. It's a complex theory that we're not going to touch on. If you set this at 30, you'll end up with about 27. If you set this at 25, like I currently have, we're only going to end up with about 23. It's not going to be a huge deal breaker one way or the other. It's just something you need to be aware of. So our backstop. These can be a bit tricky to use. Generally, the way I find it best is to have them set up like that with it touching the back of the cutter. Just make sure you sort of push it across. Obviously that locks it in. You want to make sure that the way you have that set is actually getting a good tight grip on everything. So we swing our file holder down. I'll just get that out of the way. If we look at it, I'm going to raise it up just so we've got a easier understanding. It's up against the backstop here and you can see we are not far enough forward. So we're going to just adjust our backstop forwards. So as we lower this down, it actually moves back. So it's just a matter of playing with all those different settings, trying to work it out. We're up against our backstop. This being a new tooth means it's quite tight in there. The file doesn't fit in there all that well at this stage. That'll come better over time. So what you want to do is lay it in there And to start adjusting your file height, we need to look at this from a few different angles. I'll try and move the camera around so you guys can see it. So the first thing I'm checking is from the inside there. It's very difficult to get this to show up on camera. As our file's dropping in, I want to see where it's sitting in relation to the lower section of the tooth. I don't want to be in the tie strap. So I need to just adjust the height so I'm just off the bottom of that tie strap, especially when I'm using tilt. It's going to sit down in there quite low. So I've made one or two little light passes. You can see it's cleaning up across the tooth there. The height's okay, we're not hitting anything in the bottom. What I'm going to do is make a couple more and I'll show you how to check everything. What you're aiming for is when this is dropped down, that it should be sitting just off the little roller stop in the back here. Only a very small amount. I'm not fixing any major damage on this chain. We're not removing much. I just need to adjust it. So we're just cleaning up what we want there and putting the shape we want into the chain. Double check my height by looking below it. I'll just make a couple of passes at this and just check to see we're getting what I want. So we're now at the point where it's not doing anything. The file's barely in contact with it. It's just running across that roller. I am getting a slight bit of movement out of this chain. For some reason I can't pinch it as well as I'd like. So if we look across the tooth there, you can see we've got bright shiny metal most of the way across. We're just missing a little itty bit on the top inside there, but we've set our side plate. I may adjust this forward just a little bit more so we're getting the lot. So what I've done is I've taken the chain off the mount. I'm going to turn it around and have it facing the wrong way. The reason for this is I want to expose the cutter back here. I reckon sharpening specs for this chain call for a 60-degree side plate angle. So let's make sure we've got it. We're going to use one of the Stihl crappy depth gauge tools just for the windows in it. Because we've got a nice flat surface here, we can put that over it. I move the cutter back to our 60-degree window here. I'll try and see if I can get the camera to focus in on it. This is always a nightmare to get on camera due to all the shiny surfaces working against us. What I'm doing is just placing the tool on there, looking through this window. We've got a line here at 60 degrees. I just want to make sure our side plate is at 60. Looking at that, I am extremely close. So that means our file height is correct. When we look at it from the inside, we've got bright clean metal the whole way across. We have a nice uniformed cutter. So we've got our heights right, we've got our backstop right, everything is correct. So this chain is good to go. So that's the setup process. You just need to keep playing with the height, the angles and the backstop until you get everything you want. Check your work once, then we're good to go. So now everything's set up, it's just a matter of working our way around, make sure everything's positioned right, lock it in place. Again, we're having some dramas getting in there because there's not a lot of wiggle room here because it's a brand new chain. The movement you're seeing of this is just it wobbling on the vise. It happens. So I'm just using light file strokes just due to the way this is controlled. I don't really have to put in much effort. Just check your backstop, lock it in and keep going. So a lot of people wonder why waste your time with this. It's just a useless tool, just use a round file. You can create a good chain. And while that is correct, nothing really equals the level of precision you can get out of something like this. Back to what I was saying earlier, I can make a chain cut very well using nothing but a round file and a flat file. I don't require any of these tools. Until you've experienced a chain that actually gets really well set up doing something like this, it's hard to describe what occurs. So even new chains from the factory aren't all that perfectly aligned. Everything's slightly different. A lot of the cutters are slightly different lengths. The grinds aren't perfect. They're mass producing these things. Because of that, it's sort of a close enough is good enough thing. We've got the opportunity to go around and really set these things. We can do it because we've got only a smaller amount to deal with. From what I can see of other people in the world, so like I was saying, with these cutters aren't uniform. This one I cannot get the file down in there because the actual cutter is slightly longer than the others. So this is just a round file that isn't in a guide. I can get it in there because I'm not trying to drop it through on a fixed angle. I can manipulate it. So we'll just put it in there. Give it one or two just to clear out that little bit. So like I was saying, this doesn't appear to make that big a difference in other parts of the world, but over here we're cutting extremely dense hardwoods. Balancing everything seems to have a much bigger effect here than it does in the rest of the world. If you cut with a chain that is all set to the same height, that all has the same amount of set out to the sides, everything is balanced, they cut so much nicer than most other chains. Like I was saying, they cut okay out the box. They cut well after you sharpen them. You can make them cut just really nice when you can get everything set up well. This gives you an extremely good starting point to go out and just round file them. You'll get 4 or 5 sharpenings where you're naturally just going to follow the shape that's already in the cutter, because you're going to lay your file in there, it's going to sit in that same groove, and until you get far enough back that you really need to be changing heights in a dramatic way, it's just going to carry on like that. These are just a very good tool for doing the basics. A lot of people sharpen with nothing but one of these. There's absolutely no problem with that. If you're not cutting all that frequently, then they are a great option. It takes time and practice to be good at just round filing a chain. If you're only sharpening 3 or 4 times a year, you're probably never going to get good at it because it does take time. There's a cutter that's much shorter than the rest. We're back to the beginning on this side. Okay, so that side's done. Now we need to flip it. So you come down to the wing nut underneath, loosen it off, pull the whole thing off, flip it around, reposition it up on those lugs on the top, like so. Do up the nut. So obviously all this is backwards. So going to grab my screwdriver, just going to back off these screws that hold the file in. Pull the file out, undo the backstop up here that controls our tilt, move it from 10 that way to 10 this way. Do it back up, undo that nut, back here 35, 30, 25. Do that back up, reinstall our file so the handle's pointing back towards me. Do up our nuts, just do up the screws here, nip them up slightly, and we've changed sides. You just want to double check when you change sides, make sure everything's realigning properly. I've never really had too many dramas with it. You may need to adjust the backstop slightly side to side, but it's usually pretty good. Yep, we're good. I'm happy with that. Just double check your heights and everything when you've changed sides, because you never know, things can change around a little. So yeah, then it's just literally a matter of repeating the process on the other side. You just go through, set it up, and keep going. I don't think I'm going to show it from this side because my arm's going to be in the way of wherever we put the camera. So I'll do this side. I'm going to try and dig out the file that allows you to do depth gauges on here, and I'll show you how to do that. So I flipped the whole unit back around. So Stihl can sell you one of these large triangle files. They're actually used for sharpening the clearing saw blades, but they sell them as an accessory for the FG2 and 3 for setting depth gauges. I normally do not do this. I set these without a gauge, but just because we're doing it, we will. So we need to set our tilt angle at 0. We set this angle to 0 as well. We install our triangle file, which means we need to back these off a lot. Okay, so the important part of this is make sure that the triangle file does not contact the leading edge of the cutter. We don't want to damage anything there. It is just going to be in contact with the top of our depth gauge. We need to work out what, if anything, needs to be removed. So we're just going to use, again, one of these gauges because I've got it handy. We'll move a cutter to the end here so we can test it. And yes, we need to remove a lot. There is quite a bit protruding from that. Again, this is a factory chain. Their setups usually aren't great out of the box. Doesn't matter which manufacturer we're talking about. They all have inconsistencies because of mass production. So I try and keep you guys in nice and close for that. You can see we've got the top of the triangle file just above the depth gauge. I'm going to lower it down until it touches it. I can just feel that slight resistance. Just come down a little more. So just made contact with the top. The whole idea is just use this as a checking gauge. You can go and set the first one manually just for the file and get your height off there, but I'm not in a rush today. I don't really care. Okay, we need to remove a significant amount, so time to go at it. Go through and check again. That's it. That's our height. So we're going to use that to set our height for the rest of them by just locking that in. All right, so that's going to be our height for all of them. So that's it. You do both sides at the same time. Yes, you get some chatter, but whatever. You're going to get chatter no matter what with this due to the way that I have it mounted up in the air. And we just file until it no longer makes contact. And that's our height. And you go through and you work every single one of them this way. And that is the process of adjusting depth gauges with this. It is slow and kind of painful to do it this way. It is not my favourite way of doing these, that's for sure. And you get this annoying squeak and the chatter. But yeah, it can definitely be done. So as I was saying, this definitely isn't my favourite way of doing this, especially this part. Like, bleh. But it does work. Some people do it this way. There is a second step that's required when you do it this way, so I'll show you that in a minute as well. One thing you will notice if you go through and do it like this or on a grinder, you generally notice from the factory they're not very consistent. It's just part of that mass production thing. You'll get some that you got to remove a heap off, others you barely touch. Just part of it. It does work, it's just kind of a crappy way of doing it. It's generally easier to do them on the saw. Actually don't know anyone else that used one of these things for like a heavier application, sort of more intense saw use. Most of the people using them are generally just doing their own chains. They'll have one or two. I think I was the only one I knew that actually used one of these in sort of a more intensive application. I was using saw 3 or 4 days a week, cutting nothing but hardwoods. Most of my sharpening was done on the saw, but I'd go through and run them all every week. So you generally have sort of 10 to 16 chains. I don't know anyone else that was actually doing it this way because it tends to be a bit slow. Most people would use a grinder, but I don't know, I kind of like this thing. I had it, it works very well. I prefer it over using a grinder for most things. So maybe I'm the only one dumb enough to do that. Last step of this whole process, we've gone around and I've adjusted the depth gauges. This obviously holds the tool flat. Grab yourself a flat file, or in my case a double bevel file because I've just been square filing. Go along, all of them are going to have a little flat shelf at the top with a bit of a ridge on it. Round that. Just put your finger on top and just round that edge off. You don't have to do much. Yeah, I might flip it and get the other side. I put my finger there just so I'm not, just as a way of protecting the actual cutting too. So I'm not running the file back into it. We're not lowering them at this stage, we're just rounding that edge off a bit so there's not a flat section sitting on it. A better way of doing it is to try and hold a fixed angle and just sort of shape it that way, but as long as you knock some of that edge off, you're doing all right. I'm gonna flip it around and get the other side in a second. Rightio, so that's a Stihl FG2 and how to use one. I've had a lot of experience with it. I highly rate it. Like I said, this thing was bought by my dad back in the late 80s or early 90s. So we're at least 3 decades into using this thing. I've used it pretty extensively. So it's unlikely you're going to wear them out. They use a nylon bushing up for the slide. I've not had an issue. Mine obviously has a little bit of play in it, but it's still not to the point that it desperately needs replacing. These things are expensive, they're slow to use compared to something like a chain grinder. Obviously you can't really use them in every environment because you need to mount them on a bench somewhere, but I am a big fan of these things. Hopefully they continue to make them because I think they're well and truly worth it. If you're someone who round files, you really want to be able to experiment with different angles and different bits and pieces like that, this is definitely the tool for you. It allows a much more consistent approach when you're trying to change different things. If you want to experience different top plate cutting angles or side plate angles and see the effect that they have and what might work best for your application, these are a great choice. The bar mounted Grambergs are a lot cheaper and can be precise. You need to pay attention to setting it up so the chain clamps hold it tight when you're using those bar mounted guides. This eliminates that issue because we're not dealing with the chain trying to wobble in a groove, we're fixing it somewhere. So that's it. I expect most people don't really care. Most people will never use one of these and that is perfectly fine. I can understand it. They just really suit someone like me who mostly round files a chain. It gives me an option to be able to set things up exactly how I want, go out and try and replicate it just using a file 5 or 6 times and come back and just clean it up a bit.